I'd like to honor Rob by just sharing some of the things that he taught me. And I think I can say it's so important to have a teacher that you can trust. And I certainly found that in Rob. I was born and raised Buddhist, so I've been exposed to a lot of different teachers and particularly monks in my life. And I find that most teachers, even brilliant teachers, teach from sort of a singular perspective that appears to be based on their line of practice. So it's sort of like one way of doing things. But with Rob, there's so much dimensionality. I feel like he, because of his inquisitive nature and his openness to discovery, he teaches from a multitude of angles, and I found that really helpful for me. I think when I was very young, I started to have experiences of physical bliss. And I remember, and you know, I didn't think too much of it, but looking back, I can remember that. And when I was in college, maybe like 12, 13 years ago, one evening I was walking back to my frat house, and I remember feeling in my hands a sense of buzzing or vibration or bliss in a very noticeable, kind of jarring way. And I just kind of stopped and stood there in the middle of the night in this sort of like forest walkway, feeling my hands. And then I went back to my dorm and, you know, was just wondering, what was that? And so I Googled it, and I started to read about Reiki, which is this like Japanese healing modality, sort of like an energetic healing that comes from the hands, and found a local teacher and spent a few years studying that tradition. And then later continued my Dharma practice, and anyway, eventually found a couple more teachers, and I would talk to them about these sort of experiences with physical bliss, either in my hands or elsewhere in the body. And I was sort of instructed to try and get rid of that energy, and sort of told that it was causing other issues in my practice. And so I formed this notion that what I was doing when I was meditating was escaping from the world, you know, indulging in some kind of pleasure with a lot of attachment, and that in particular that physical, you know, quote unquote energy that I was feeling was to be put aside. And so I entered into a period of a few years where I wasn't really meditating, because I mean, it was impossible not to be attached to that pleasure, and it was impossible to not give rise to that pleasure whenever I would try to meditate. Even, you know, a moment of metta here and there would give rise to that energy. So I was quite lost. Yeah, I was quite lost. And then I was lucky enough to encounter Rob, and listening to his jhana retreats and how he spoke about Piti, this factor on the path, the factor of enlightenment that presents itself as physical well-being, that can be a vibration, a tone, a flavor, can carry temperature, it can move in different directions. You know, I'd never encountered any teaching that was so precise, so detailed. And it was just a transformative moment, because it was very clear that what I had encountered in my own body as a child and later as a teenager was nothing other than Piti. And it was to be encouraged, to be fostered, to be spread and stabilized, not to be run from, not to run from it, but one should cultivate it. And it's really difficult to overstate how important that teaching was for me personally. And it was almost like as soon as I heard it, I recognized the truth of it, because I could feel, it's almost like I could feel that what was arising in the body was blameless, was trustworthy, was beautiful. But lacking confidence and experience as a meditator, I needed a teacher to validate that. So that was really powerful for me. And then later in that retreat, Rob says that, one way to think about Piti is as an energy, a physical energy, but a much more helpful, beneficial way to conceive of Piti is as a way of perceiving the body, as a perceptual skill, a perceptual attainment. And that was something I certainly had never considered. So from there, I feel like the teachings of Rob have really challenged notions and kind of, forced me to go beyond a lot of conceptions in a very helpful way. So I'll speak a little bit about a few more. I think the next leg of my journey with Rob came when I started listening to his 2010 Meditations on Emptiness retreat. And yeah, just the way he defined emptiness and the way he defined delusion, these words that I had heard, thousands of times before. It completely changed my experience of those concepts. And I remember it was during a particularly difficult time in my career and in my life where I was pretty unhappy with quite a bit of external circumstances in my life. But when I listened to that retreat, it was, I just had this sense of like every time I opened my laptop and sat there and, listened to his teachings on emptiness, that, I was touching something more precious than gold. I was hearing Dharma from the Buddha's lips. Yeah, it's like even, thinking about it now is emotional. And I can't help but tremble. And from those teachings on emptiness, I would say began the next leg of my journey with Rob, which I'm currently on. When Rob said that emptiness gives you permission and opens up new possibilities, he said it includes the possibility for where the eradication of dukkha or suffering may not always be the most important priority for you. And he talks about how nibbana or enlightenment is empty, and how the definition of nirvana is dependent on the mind. And how emptiness gives permission for things like soul making. For generating beauty and sacredness, meaningfulness. And how Rob defined equanimity, or I should say, expanded the borders of upekkha, equanimity, to include this idea that all things could become equal in their sacredness. Yeah, these are some of the things that he taught me. So I want to say thank you. To Rob.